The night of my sweet 16, I learned that some people will destroy your happiest moments just to watch you break. But what my sister Vivian didn't know was that our father, the Secretary of Defense, keeps detailed records on everyone, including family members who crossed the line. When the smoke cleared and the truth came out, she discovered that betraying a Blackwood comes with consequences that reach far beyond a ruined party. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The invitation was perfect. Cream cardstock with gold foil lettering, my name embossed in elegant script. Zara Blackwood cordially invites you to celebrate her sweet 16. 3 months of planning had gone into this night. 3 months of vendor meetings, dress fittings, and careful coordination with Dad's security detail. When your father is the Secretary of Defense, even birthday parties require clearance levels. I held the invitation up to the afternoon light streaming through the bay windows of our Potomac Falls estate. Everything had to be flawless. Not because I was spoiled, but because perfection was the Blackwood standard. Dad commanded the largest military force in the world, Mom chaired 3 diplomatic charities, and my older sister Vivian was already being groomed for Harvard Law and a future in politics. I was 16 and desperate to prove I belonged in this family of achievers. The party was set for Saturday evening at the Willard Intercontinental Hotel in downtown Washington. 200 guests, including senators, children, ambassadors, families, and enough young political royalty to fill a small country's parliament. The theme was Midnight in Paris, complete with vintage Parisian decorations, a 12-piece jazz ensemble, and a cake that cost more than most people's cars. Vivian lounged on the antique settee across from me, her law prep books scattered around her like fallen leaves. At 19, she possessed the kind of effortless elegance that made magazine photographers follow her around Georgetown social events. Dark hair always perfectly styled, outfits that managed to be both age-appropriate and sophisticated, and a smile that could charm foreign dignitaries into revealing state secrets. "The guest list looks impressive," she said without looking up from her constitutional law textbook. "Though I notice you invited the Pemberton twins. Interesting choice." I glanced at her carefully. Vivian never made casual observations. "They're in my AP government class, why wouldn't I invite them?" She finally looked up, her green eyes unreadable. "Oh, no reason. Just surprised you'd want them there after what happened at Charlotte Morrison's debut last month." My stomach dropped. What happened at Charlotte's debut? Vivian's smile was razor thin. "Nothing major. Just some photos that circulated afterward." Social media can be so unforgiving these days. She returned to her book as if she hadn't just planted a seed of anxiety that would grow into a full panic attack by evening. This was classic Vivian. She never attacked directly, never left fingerprints. Instead, she'd drop cryptic comments that sent me spiraling, questioning every decision I'd made. By the time I realized she was manipulating me, the damage was already done. I spent the rest of the afternoon researching Charlotte Morrison's debut, scouring social media for any mention of the Pemberton twins. I found nothing, which somehow made it worse. Vivian's threats were always vague enough to seem plausible but specific enough to create doubt. Dad arrived home at 6, his black sedan pulling through the estate's security gates with practiced precision. Even off-duty, Secretary James Blackwood moved like a man accustomed to commanding attention. 6 feet tall, silver-haired, with the kind of authoritative presence that made foreign ministers nervous and made me feel safe. He'd served 3 presidents, survived 2 Pentagon reorganizations, and could deliver a briefing on global military strategy, while simultaneously helping me with calculus homework. "How's my birthday girl?" he asked, loosening his tie as he entered the foyer. The smile lines around his eyes deepened when he saw me coming down the marble staircase in my dress rehearsal outfit. "Nervous," I admitted, accepting his hug. Dad always smelled like expensive cologne and the faint trace of security badge lanyards. "What if something goes wrong tonight?" He pulled back to look at me seriously. In the Blackwood family, concerns were addressed with strategic planning, not empty reassurance. "Walk me through your contingencies." We spent 20 minutes reviewing the evening's timeline. Cocktail hour from 7 to 8. Dinner service until 9:30. Dancing until midnight. Security would be handled by Dad's personal detail, coordinated with hotel management. The gift table would be monitored, the guest list cross-referenced with current security clearances, and my phone would be equipped with a direct line to Colonel Harrison, Dad's chief of staff. "What about Vivian?" I asked quietly. Dad's expression shifted slightly. "What about her?" "She's been strange all week, making comments about tonight, about my friends. I think she's upset that I'm getting this much attention." He was quiet for a long moment, processing this information the way he processed intelligence briefings. "Sibling rivalry is normal, Zara. But if you're genuinely concerned about her behavior, we can discuss it after the party. Tonight is about celebrating you." Mom appeared in the doorway, resplendent in a navy cocktail dress that probably cost more than a small car. Diana Blackwood was the kind of woman who made ambassadors' wives feel underdressed at casual brunches. Former State Department, current social architect of Washington's most influential diplomatic circles, and the unofficial hostess for events that shaped international policy. "The car will be here in an hour," she announced, checking her vintage Cartier watch. "Vivian's already dressed and helping Ms. Delacroix with last-minute arrangements at the hotel." Something cold settled in my chest. "Vivian went to the hotel early?" "She volunteered to coordinate with the event planner," Mom said, adjusting my necklace with practiced efficiency. I thought it was sweet of her to help. Dad and I exchanged glances. Vivian never volunteered for anything that didn't directly benefit her political aspirations. Her helping with my party was like a senator voluntarily giving up committee assignments. An hour later, we arrived at the Willard in Dad's official vehicle, a black sedan that carried more security equipment than most small countries' defense budgets. The hotel had been transformed into a Parisian dreamscape, complete with vintage street lamps, ivy-covered archways, and enough white roses to stock a small florist shop. Ms. Delacroix, our event planner, greeted us with the kind of barely controlled panic that suggested something had already gone wrong. "Secretary Blackwood, Mrs. Blackwood," she said, her French accent thicker than usual under stress. "We've had a small complication with the seating arrangements." My heart stopped. What kind of complication? It appears there was some confusion with the final guest list. Several additional names were added at the last minute, and the original seating chart had to be completely restructured. Dad's expression hardened. "Who authorized changes to the guest list?" "Your eldest daughter," Ms. Delacroix replied carefully. "She said it was approved by the family, and that the original arrangements were outdated." I felt the blood drain from my face. Vivian had sabotaged my seating chart. Hours of careful planning, ensuring that friends sat with friends, that potential conflicts were separated, that shy classmates were placed with welcoming groups, all destroyed. "Where is Vivian now?" Mom asked, her diplomatic training keeping her voice level despite the storm building in her eyes. "In the powder room, I believe. She mentioned needing to make some phone calls before the guests arrived." Dad pulled out his phone and stepped away, speaking in the low, urgent tones he used for national security briefings. Mom guided me toward the ballroom entrance, her hand steady on my shoulder. "We'll fix this," she murmured. "Your father didn't negotiate 3 Middle East peace accords to be defeated by a seating chart." But as guests began arriving, it became clear that the seating arrangement was just the beginning. The Pemberton twins cornered me near the gift table, their identical faces wearing identical expressions of confused hurt. "Zara, we need to talk," Madison Pemberton said, her voice tight with suppressed emotion. "We got your message," her sister Mackenzie added, "but we thought you should know that it's not true." My blood turned to ice water. "What message?" They exchanged glances, the kind of wordless communication that twins perfect over years of shared secrets. Madison pulled out her phone and showed me a text thread. The message was from my number, sent 3 hours ago. It read, "Hey, just wanted to give you a heads up that some people have been spreading rumors about you two at school. Nothing major, but thought you should know before tonight. Some of the other guests might be weird about it. Just ignore them and have fun." I stared at the screen, reading the message 3 times before the full implications hit me. Someone had sent this text from my phone to multiple guests, creating drama where none existed and making me look like I was either starting rumors or trying to manage social situations I had nothing to do with. "I didn't send this," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "We figured," Mackenzie said kindly. "It didn't sound like you." "But Zara, At least 6 other people got similar messages. Different rumors, but all vague enough to create tension without being specific enough to trace. The room began to spin slightly. My perfect party, my moment to prove I could handle Blackwood-level social events, was being systematically destroyed by someone who had access to my phone. Vivian appeared beside us like a ghost materializing from shadows, resplendent in a black cocktail dress that managed to be both elegant and slightly inappropriate for someone else's birthday party. "The Pemberton twins!" she exclaimed with perfectly calibrated enthusiasm. "I'm so glad you could make it. Zara was just telling me how excited she was to have you here." The twins smiled politely, but I could see the wariness in their eyes. They'd received a text designed to make them paranoid, and now my sister was being suspiciously welcoming. "Vivian," I said carefully, "can I talk to you privately for a moment?" "Of course. Sisters should stick together at events like this." Her smile was radiant and completely terrifying. We walked toward a quiet corner near the jazz ensemble, past tables of guests who were checking their phones with expressions ranging from confusion to irritation.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
My carefully curated guest list was turning into a social minefield, and I was beginning to understand that this wasn't accidental. "Did you send messages from my phone?" I asked directly. Vivian's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind her eyes. "What an odd question. Why would I do something like that?" "Because you've been sabotaging my party since before it started. The seating chart, the mysterious comments about the Pemberton twins, and now text messages that are creating drama among my friends." She tilted her head, studying me with the kind of clinical interest she usually reserved for constitutional law case studies. "Zara, you sound paranoid. It's your birthday party. Everyone's here to celebrate you. Maybe you're just overwhelmed by all the attention." The dismissal was perfectly executed. Concerned enough to seem caring, condescending enough to make me doubt my own perceptions. This was Vivian's specialty, gaslighting disguised as sisterly concern. "I know what you're doing," I said quietly. "I'm attending my little sister's birthday party and trying to help when things go wrong," she replied smoothly. "If you're upset about something, maybe you should talk to Mom and Dad instead of blaming me for coincidences." Before I could respond, Dad appeared beside us with the silent efficiency of a man trained in military tactics. "Vivian, I need to speak with you," he said. His tone was pleasant enough for public consumption, but I caught the steel underneath. "Colonel Harrison has some questions about the guest list modifications." For the first time all evening, Vivian's composure cracked slightly. "Questions about what?" "Security clearance issues," Dad replied calmly. "Apparently several names were added to tonight's event without proper vetting. Since you handled the final coordination, Colonel Harrison needs to understand the authorization process." Vivian's face went pale beneath her carefully applied makeup. Adding unauthorized guests to a defense secretary's family event wasn't just party planning, it was a potential security breach. "I'm sure it was just a miscommunication," she said, but her voice had lost its confident edge. "I'm sure it was," Dad agreed. "That's why we need to clarify the details." "Shall we?" As they walked away, I caught a glimpse of Dad's expression. He wasn't just handling a party crisis, he was conducting an interrogation. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of forced smiles and damage control. Mom worked the room like the diplomatic professional she was, smoothing over confused guests and deflecting questions about the mysterious text messages. I danced with classmates who kept asking if everything was okay, accepted birthday wishes from family friends who seemed genuinely unaware of the evening's drama, and tried to salvage what remained of my Sweet 16 celebration. But every time I looked across the ballroom, I saw Vivian standing near the wall, no longer mingling, no longer orchestrating. She was watching me with an expression I'd never seen before, genuine fear. Whatever Dad had discovered during their conversation, it was bigger than party sabotage. And as the evening wound down and guests began leaving with polite thanks and slightly confused expressions, I realized that my ruined Sweet 16 was about to become the least of Vivian's problems. The real reckoning was just beginning. The drive home felt like riding in a hearse. Dad sat in the front passenger seat, speaking in hushed tones with Colonel Harrison, while the security detail navigated the empty streets of downtown Washington. Mom held my hand in the back seat, her thumb tracing gentle circles on my palm the way she used to when I was little, and had nightmares about monsters under the bed. Tonight, the monster had been sitting at our dinner table for 19 years. Vivian rode in the second vehicle, separated from us for the first time in my memory during a family event. Through the tinted windows, I could see her silhouette rigid against the leather seats, no longer the confident puppet master who had orchestrated my humiliation just hours earlier. The estate loomed ahead of us, its Georgian columns illuminated by security floodlights that cast everything in stark relief. Home had always felt like a fortress, but tonight it felt more like a prison preparing for interrogation. Dad's phone buzzed constantly during the short walk from the car to the front door, each vibration marking another development in whatever investigation he'd launched. "Zara, sweetheart," Mom said as we entered the foyer, "why don't you go upstairs and get comfortable? Your father and I need to handle some things." I nodded, but instead of going to my room, I lingered at the top of the grand staircase. The marble steps had perfect acoustics, a design feature I discovered during countless childhood attempts to eavesdrop on my parents' conversations. Tonight, that architectural quirk would serve a more serious purpose. Dad's study door closed with a soft click, but voices carried through the heavy oak anyway. I settled onto the top step, my party dress spread around me like the wilted petals of some expensive flower. "The phone records are definitive," Dad was saying, his voice carrying the same calm authority he used in Pentagon briefings. 17 text messages sent from Zara's device between 4 and 6 p.m. The service provider confirmed the geolocation data places the phone at the hotel during that time frame. "How did she get access to Zara's phone?" Mom asked. "She didn't need access to the physical device. She cloned the number using a SIM card duplicator. Military-grade equipment, Diana. The kind of technology that requires security clearance to purchase." My blood froze. Vivian hadn't just borrowed my phone or guessed my password. She'd used actual espionage equipment to impersonate me electronically. This wasn't sibling rivalry. It was something far more sophisticated and infinitely more serious. Where would she get military-grade technology? Mom's voice was barely above a whisper. Dad was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his tone had shifted into something darker, more dangerous. "That's what we're going to find out." Footsteps approached the study door, and I quickly retreated to my bedroom before anyone could discover my unauthorized intelligence gathering. My room felt strange now, like a crime scene I was seeing for the first time. The vanity where I'd gotten ready for the party, the closet where I'd chosen my dress, the nightstand where I charged my phone every evening, all of it felt contaminated by the knowledge that someone had been watching, planning, preparing to destroy the most important night of my teenage life. I changed into pajamas and sat cross-legged on my bed, staring at my phone like it was a venomous snake. How long had Vivian been monitoring my communications? What other conversations had she intercepted? What other plans had she sabotaged before I even knew they existed? A soft knock interrupted my spiraling thoughts. "Come in," I called, expecting Mom or Dad. Instead, Vivian slipped through the door like smoke, still wearing her black cocktail dress, but somehow looking smaller than she had at the hotel. Her makeup was smudged, her usually perfect hair disheveled from whatever conversation she'd endured with Dad. "We need to talk," she said, closing the door behind her with careful precision. "I don't think we do." I pulled my knees up to my chest, creating a physical barrier between us. "I think you've said enough for one evening." She moved toward my desk chair but didn't sit, instead gripping the back of it like an anchor. "You don't understand the situation you've created." "The situation I've created?" The laugh that escaped my throat was bitter and sharp. "You sabotaged my birthday party using military surveillance equipment, and somehow I'm the one who created a situation?" Vivian's carefully constructed mask finally cracked, revealing something raw and desperate underneath. "You have no idea what you're dealing with. Dad isn't just upset about tonight. He's treating this like a national security investigation. Maybe because it is one." I stood up, suddenly feeling older than my 16 years. You used classified technology to impersonate a government official's family member. That's not a prank, Vivian. That's a federal crime. It wasn't supposed to go this far, she whispered, sinking into the chair despite her earlier hesitation. It was just supposed to be a small disruption, something to remind you that not everything comes easily. Remind me of what, exactly? That my own sister hates me enough to destroy the most important night of my life? I don't hate you. Her voice cracked on the words. I hate that everything has always been so effortless for you. Perfect grades, perfect friends, perfect relationship with mom and dad. Do you know what it's like to watch your little sister excel at everything you've struggled with? The admission hung between us like a live wire. For the first time in my life, I was seeing Vivian without her armor of confidence and manipulation. So you decided to ruin my party because you're jealous? I asked. I decided to level the playing field, she corrected. Just once, I wanted you to experience what it felt like when social situations became complicated, when people questioned your judgment, when perfection slipped through your fingers. By committing multiple federal crimes? Vivian's face went pale. What do you mean, multiple? I walked to my window, looking out at the estate's manicured grounds. In the distance, I could see security personnel conducting some kind of sweep of the property. Whatever Dad had set in motion tonight was bigger than a birthday party investigation. The SIM card cloning, the unauthorized access to communication networks, the security breach at a government official's family event, I listed without turning around. And that's just what we know about. Dad's had teams working on this for hours, Vivian. What else are they going to find? When I finally turned back toward her, she looked like someone who just realized she was standing in quicksand. I need you to talk to them, she said, desperation creeping into her voice. Tell Dad it was just a misunderstanding, a stupid prank that got out of hand. He'll listen to you. Will he? I asked. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you declared war on his family using weapons you stole from his own arsenal. I'm not sure there's anything I could say that would make this better. A sharp knock on my door interrupted us. Zara? Dad's voice was calm but implacable. I need to speak with you privately. Vivian stood up so quickly that the chair rolled backward into my desk. Don't let them turn you against me, she whispered urgently. We're sisters. That has to count for something. It would have, I replied quietly. If you'd remembered that before tonight. Dad entered as Vivian slipped past him, their brief eye contact charged with unspoken communication. He waited until her footsteps faded down the hallway before closing the door and taking the seat she'd vacated. How are you holding up? He asked. Confused, angry. Trying to understand how someone I've lived with my entire life could hate me this much. Dad nodded slowly, processing my words with the same careful attention he gave international crisis briefings. I don't think she hates you, Zara. I think she's been struggling with something much more complicated than sibling rivalry, and tonight it manifested in ways that crossed several very serious lines. How serious? He was quiet for a moment, weighing how much information to share with his 16-year-old daughter about what was clearly becoming a significant security investigation. The technology she used to clone your phone number is restricted to authorized personnel with top-secret clearance, quote, he said finally. The fact that she had access to it raises questions about how she obtained it, and what other classified materials she might have encountered. My stomach dropped. You think she's been stealing from you? I think she's been making choices that she didn't fully understand the consequences of, Dad replied carefully. And now those choices have created a situation that extends far beyond family dynamics. What happens next? Dad leaned forward, his expression shifting into the gentle but serious mode he used when explaining complex political situations. Colonel Harrison is conducting a full security review. We need to determine the scope of any unauthorized access, secure any compromised materials, and assess whether this represents an ongoing threat to national security. And Vivian? Vivian will face the consequences of her actions. But Zara, I need you to understand something important. This investigation isn't about revenge or punishment. It's about protecting information that keeps our country safe. Your sister may have intended this as a personal attack, but she used tools that could compromise national security. I nodded, trying to wrap my mind around the magnitude of what Vivian had set in motion. Can I ask you something? Of course. How long have you known something was wrong? Dad's expression shifted slightly, revealing a glimpse of the strategic thinking that made him one of the most effective defense secretaries in recent history. I've been concerned about Vivian's behavior for several months, he admitted. Small things that individually seemed insignificant but formed a pattern when viewed together. Questions about my work that seemed too specific, interest in areas outside her usual academic focus, access to places in the house where she normally wouldn't have business. You've been watching her. I've been paying attention. There's a difference. He stood up, moving to the window where I'd been standing moments earlier. In my line of work, you learn to recognize when someone's behavior changes in ways that suggest they're operating under influences or pressures you don't understand. What kind of influences? Dad turned back toward me, and for the first time all evening I saw something that looked like genuine worry in his eyes. That's what we're going to find out. The next morning arrived with the kind of oppressive silence that follows major storms. I woke to the sound of unfamiliar voices in the hallway outside my room, low conversations peppered with military terminology and security protocols. Through my bedroom window I could see additional vehicles in our circular driveway, black sedans and SUVs that screamed government operation. Mom knocked and entered with a breakfast tray, her usual morning efficiency tempered by obvious stress. I thought you might want to eat in your room today, she said, setting the tray on my nightstand. There are people working downstairs. What kind of people? Security specialists. They're conducting a comprehensive review of our home systems, communications, and any areas where sensitive information might have been accessed. I sat up in bed, accepting the cup of coffee she offered. How's Vivian? Mom's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. Your sister is cooperating with the investigation. She's speaking with Colonel Harrison and a team of specialists this morning. Is she in trouble? She's in a situation that requires very careful handling. Mom replied diplomatically. Your father is working to ensure that this gets resolved in a way that protects both our family and national security interests. But she did break the law, right? Mom sat on the edge of my bed, her diplomatic training warring with maternal instinct. Yes, sweetheart. She broke several very serious laws. The question now is whether she acted alone or whether she was influenced by outside parties. Outside parties? Foreign intelligence services are always looking for ways to access information about high-ranking government officials and their families. Sometimes they approach family members directly, and sometimes they use more subtle methods of influence. The implication hit me like a physical blow. You think someone recruited Vivian as a spy? We're investigating all possibilities, Mom said carefully. But Zara, I need you to understand that regardless of what we discover, this investigation will have consequences for our entire family. The media attention alone will be significant. I set down my coffee cup, no longer interested in caffeine. What do you mean? Your father holds one of the most sensitive positions in government. When a family member of a defense secretary is investigated for potential security breaches, it becomes a matter of public interest. There will be news coverage, congressional questions, and intense scrutiny of our family's private life. Including mine, including yours. Your phone records, your friendships, your activities, your social media presence. Everything will be examined and potentially made public. I stared at her, finally understanding the true scope of what Vivian had unleashed. This wasn't just about a ruined birthday party or even criminal charges. This was about our family's reputation, Dad's career, and my own future being subjected to the kind of public examination that destroyed political lives. How long will this take? We don't know yet. It depends on what the investigation uncovers and how cooperatively everyone involved responds to questioning. A soft knock interrupted our conversation. Colonel Harrison appeared in the doorway, his usually crisp military bearing slightly softened by obvious fatigue. Mrs. Blackwood, Miss Blackwood, he said formally. I apologize for the intrusion, but we need to speak with Zara about the events leading up to last night's party. Mom squeezed my hand. Of course. Zara, just answer Colonel Harrison's questions honestly. You haven't done anything wrong. But as I followed him downstairs to Dad's study, where a team of serious-faced investigators waited with recording equipment and file folders, I couldn't shake the feeling that innocence might not be enough to protect me from what was coming. The investigation had moved beyond family drama into the realm of national security, and I was about to learn that when you're the daughter of the defense secretary, even being a victim comes with consequences that reach far beyond anything you could have imagined. The study had been transformed into something resembling a war room. Multiple laptops hummed on Dad's usually pristine mahogany desk, their screens displaying data streams I couldn't begin to interpret. Colonel Harrison gestured for me to take a seat in one of the leather chairs facing the desk, while two other investigators I didn't recognize positioned themselves strategically around the room. "Miss Blackwood," Colonel Harrison began, his voice carrying the kind of professional courtesy that preceded uncomfortable questions. "We appreciate your cooperation with this investigation. I want to assure you that you're not under suspicion of any wrongdoing, but your testimony is crucial to understanding the timeline and scope of your sister's activities." I nodded, trying to project the kind of calm competence that seemed to run in my family's DNA. "I'll help however I can." The woman to my left introduced herself as Agent Patricia Morse from the Defense Counterintelligence and Security Agency. She looked like someone who solved puzzles for a living, with sharp eyes that seemed to catalog every micro-expression and vocal inflection. "Let's start with the past 6 months," Agent Morse said, consulting a tablet that contained what appeared to be an extensive timeline. "Have you noticed any changes in your sister's behavior, interests, or social circle?" I thought back through the autumn and winter, trying to separate normal college-age evolution from potentially suspicious activities. She started spending more time in Dad's study when he wasn't home. She said she was researching constitutional law cases, but she seemed more interested in his filing cabinets than his law books. "Did she ever ask you questions about your father's work?" Colonel Harrison asked. "Not directly, but she started bringing up current events at dinner that seemed designed to get him talking about policy decisions. Foreign military deployments, defense budget allocations, technology partnerships with allied nations." I thought she was just trying to sound sophisticated. Agent Morse made notes on her tablet. "What about new friendships or relationships? Anyone you hadn't met before?" There was someone she started mentioning around Christmas. "Marcus, I think?" She said he was a graduate student at Georgetown, studying international relations. She never brought him to family events, but she talked about him like they were getting serious. The investigators exchanged glances that suggested this information was more significant than I'd realized. "Did she ever mention Marcus's last name or any specific details about his background?" Agent Morse pressed. "Not really. She was always vague about personal details. But she did say he was from Eastern Europe originally, somewhere that had complicated political relationships with NATO. She thought it was romantic, dating someone with such an international perspective." Colonel Harrison leaned forward slightly. "Zara, this is important. Did Vivian ever ask you to do anything unusual regarding your phone, your computer, or your social media accounts?" I frowned, trying to remember seemingly innocent requests that might have had darker purposes. "About 3 months ago, she asked if she could borrow my laptop because hers was being repaired. She said she just needed to check email and work on a paper, but she had it for almost a week." "What about your phone?" "She never asked to borrow it directly, but she was always around when I was charging it, or leaving it unattended. Sometimes I'd find it moved from where I'd left it, but she always had explanations. She was cleaning my room, or she'd accidentally knocked it over, things like that." Agent Morse's stylus moved rapidly across her tablet. "Did you ever notice unauthorized charges on your family's phone bill? International calls, premium services, anything unusual?" "I don't see our phone bills. Dad handles all that through his office accounts because of security protocols." "Of course." Colonel Harrison consulted his own notes. "Let's talk about last night specifically. When did you first realize something was wrong with your party?" I walked them through the evening step by step, from Ms. Delacroix's revelation about the seating chart changes to the discovery of the fake text messages. As I spoke, I watched the investigators' expressions grow increasingly grave. The messages were sophisticated, Agent Morse observed. They were designed to create social tension without being traceable to any specific accusation. That level of psychological manipulation requires training or extensive guidance. You think someone taught her how to do this? We think your sister received assistance that goes far beyond typical sibling rivalry, Colonel Harrison replied carefully. The question is whether she understood the true nature of that assistance. A soft knock interrupted our conversation. Dad entered the study, his expression unreadable but his posture suggesting significant developments. "Colonel, Agent Morse," he said formally, "we've had a breakthrough in the communications analysis." Agent Morse looked up from her tablet. "What did you find?" "Vivian's been in regular contact with an individual using encrypted messaging apps. The contact identified himself as Marcus Petrov, but facial recognition and background checks indicate that's an alias. His real name is Dmitry Volkov, and he's a known operative with the GRU." My blood turned to ice water. The GRU was Russian military intelligence. Vivian hadn't just been dating someone with an international perspective. She'd been romantically involved with a foreign spy. "How long has this relationship been active?" Colonel Harrison asked. "Communications data shows first contact in early October. The relationship progressed rapidly, with daily contact by November and in-person meetings beginning in December. The pattern matches classic recruitment protocols for targeting family members of high-value intelligence assets." Agent Morse turned back to me. "Zara, think carefully. Did Vivian ever ask you questions about your father's schedule, his travel plans, or his work routines?" The memories came flooding back now, recontextualized by this new information. She started asking about family dinners, when Dad would be home, whether he brought work with him, what he did in his study during evening hours. She said she was trying to plan her own schedule around family time. "What about your mother's activities?" Vivian became really interested in Mom's charity work. She wanted to know about upcoming events, guest lists, which diplomatic families would be attending. She said she was thinking about getting more involved in political fundraising. Dad's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Diana's charity events include ambassadors, foreign ministers, and their families. The guest lists alone would be valuable intelligence for mapping Washington's diplomatic networks. "How much information do you think Vivian shared with this Dmitry person?" I asked. "That's what we're working to determine," Agent Morse replied. "But based on the sophistication of last night's operation and the technology involved, we believe she provided significant details about your family's routines, security protocols, and social connections." Colonel Harrison stood up, moving to one of the laptops on Dad's desk. "The SIM cloning equipment she used requires specialized knowledge to operate. Someone had to teach her how to use it, which means she received hands-on training from a foreign intelligence operative." "Could she be charged with treason?" I asked quietly. The room fell silent. Dad moved to stand behind my chair, his hand settling gently on my shoulder. "The legal implications are complex," he said finally. "Intent matters in espionage cases. If Vivian genuinely believed she was in a romantic relationship and didn't understand that she was being manipulated by a foreign agent, the charges might be different than if she knowingly participated in intelligence gathering." "But she still broke multiple laws," Agent Morse added. "Unauthorized access to classified technology, security breaches at government facilities, fraud related to electronic communications. Even if espionage charges don't apply, she's facing serious federal crimes." A new voice interrupted from the doorway, "Which is why we need to handle this very carefully." I turned to see a woman I didn't recognize, wearing a tailored suit that screamed high-level government official. She carried herself with the kind of authority that made everyone else in the room automatically defer to her presence. Dad straightened slightly. "Director Chen, thank you for coming personally." Director Chen stepped into the room, her sharp eyes taking in the assembled investigators and equipment. "This situation has implications that extend far beyond a single family. We need to understand the full scope of the intelligence compromise and neutralize any ongoing threats." She turned to me with the kind of focused attention that felt like being examined under a microscope. "Miss Blackwood, I'm Director Chen from the FBI's Counterintelligence Division. I understand this is overwhelming, but your cooperation is essential for protecting national security. What do you need from me?" We need you to help us understand your sister's state of mind and her relationship with the individual known as Marcus Petrov. More importantly, we need your help in determining whether this operation is still active. What do you mean, still active? Director Chen exchanged glances with Dad before continuing. Your sister's party sabotage may have been a test, a way for her handlers to assess her operational capabilities and willingness to take risks. If she passed that test, they may be planning to escalate her activities. The implications hit me like a physical blow. You think they're going to ask her to do something worse? We think they've been building towards something bigger, and last night was meant to demonstrate her commitment to their relationship, Agent Morse explained. Foreign intelligence services don't invest months in developing an asset just to ruin birthday parties. What would they want her to do? Dad's hand tightened slightly on my shoulder. Access my home office, copy sensitive documents, plant surveillance equipment, or provide intelligence about my schedule and security arrangements. Any of those activities could compromise ongoing military operations and endanger lives. Director Chen pulled out her own tablet, swiping through what appeared to be surveillance photos. We've been monitoring Dmitry Volkov since he entered the country 6 months ago. He's a specialist in recruiting family members of high-value targets. His previous operations have resulted in significant intelligence losses for our allies. She showed me a photo of a man who looked like he belonged in a European fashion magazine. Dark hair, expensive clothes, the kind of smile that would make college-age women lose their ability to think critically. This is the man your sister believes she's in love with, Director Chen said. He's been using a sophisticated cover identity, complete with academic credentials and a carefully constructed personal history. To her, he's Marcus Petrov, graduate student and romantic partner. To us, he's a dangerous foreign operative who's been systematically compromising American national security through emotional manipulation. Does Vivian know the truth about him? That's what we need to determine. And depending on what we discover, we'll need to decide whether she can be turned into an asset for our counterintelligence operation, or whether she represents an ongoing security threat that needs to be neutralized. The clinical language sent chills down my spine. What does neutralized mean? It means arrested, prosecuted, and imprisoned, Dad said quietly. Your sister is facing the possibility of spending the rest of her life in federal prison for espionage-related crimes. I stared at the photo of Dmitry Volkov, trying to reconcile this revelation with the sister I'd grown up with. Vivian was manipulative and competitive, but she wasn't a traitor. She was just a college student who'd been expertly targeted by someone trained to exploit her vulnerabilities. What if we warned her? I asked. What if we told her the truth about Marcus and gave her a chance to cooperate with your investigation? Director Chen and Dad exchanged glances that suggested they'd already considered this option. That's one possibility, Director Chen said carefully. But it comes with significant risks. If Vivian tips off Dmitry that we know about their relationship, he disappears and we lose our chance to understand the full scope of his operation. Worse, he might activate other assets we don't know about. And if we don't warn her, we continue surveillance, gather evidence, and wait for them to make their next move, which puts your sister in the position of potentially committing more serious crimes before we intervene. Agent Morse looked up from her tablet. There's another option. We could use Zara to help us understand Vivian's current mental state and willingness to cooperate. Absolutely not, Dad said immediately. I won't have my younger daughter involved in a counterintelligence operation. With respect, Secretary Blackwood, Director Chen said, Zara is already involved. She's been living in the same house as a potential intelligence asset, attending the same social events, and interacting with the same people. Her insights could be crucial for determining how to proceed. I looked around the room at the assembled investigators, feeling the weight of their expectations and the magnitude of the situation. My sister was in love with a Russian spy who'd used her feelings to turn her into a weapon against our own family. Dad's career and our family's safety hung in the balance, and somehow, everyone was looking to me for answers. What would you need me to do? I asked quietly. Dad's hand tightened on my shoulder again. Zara, you don't have to. Yes, I do, I interrupted. This is my family too. And if there's a way to help Vivian without destroying everything Dad has worked for, I want to try. Director Chen studied me with the kind of calculating assessment that suggested she was weighing my potential usefulness against the risks of involving a civilian. We'd need you to act naturally around your sister while observing her behavior and reporting any conversations that might indicate her future plans or her relationship status with Dmitri. Think of it as being our eyes and ears inside the family dynamic. You want me to spy on my own sister. We want you to help us save her, Agent Morse corrected. If Vivian continues down this path without intervention, she's going to end up in federal prison for the rest of her life. If we can determine that she's been manipulated rather than recruited, we might be able to offer her a different outcome. I looked up at Dad, trying to read his expression. His face revealed nothing, but I could feel the tension in his posture. "It's your choice," he said finally. "But understand that whatever you decide, this investigation is moving forward. The question is whether you want to help shape how it unfolds." Outside the study windows, I could see the sun setting over our estate's grounds, casting long shadows across the manicured lawns where Vivian and I had played as children. Those carefree days felt like they belonged to someone else's life now. "I'll do it," I said. "But I want to try to save her, not just gather evidence against her." Director Chen nodded slowly. "That's exactly what we're hoping for, Miss Blackwood. Because your sister isn't just a potential criminal, she's also potentially our best chance of understanding and dismantling a broader intelligence operation that threatens national security." As the investigators began packing up their equipment and planning their next steps, I realized that my ruined Sweet 16 party had been just the beginning. The real test of my family's strength was about to unfold, and the stakes were higher than anything I could have imagined. The breakfast table felt like a stage set for a play no one wanted to perform. Mom had insisted on maintaining our normal family routines, but nothing about this morning was normal. Vivian sat across from me, mechanically eating scrambled eggs while staring at her phone with an intensity that suggested she was expecting important communication. Dad reviewed briefing papers between sips of coffee, his expression unreadable but his posture tense. And I sat in the middle, acutely aware that I was now an active participant in a counterintelligence operation targeting my own sister. The wire I wore was smaller than a button, concealed beneath my school blazer with the kind of professional expertise that made me wonder how often the FBI equipped teenagers for surveillance operations. Agent Morse had assured me it was virtually undetectable, but I felt like everyone in the room could see it pulsing against my chest like a guilty heartbeat. "I'm thinking of skipping my morning classes," Vivian announced suddenly, breaking the careful silence. "There's something I need to take care of downtown." Dad looked up from his papers with practiced casualness. "Oh? What kind of errands require missing constitutional law?" "Just meeting with a study group," she replied, but her voice carried a nervous edge that hadn't been there before last night's confrontation. "We're working on a research project about diplomatic immunity and international law enforcement." The topic choice felt deliberately provocative, like she was testing whether Dad would react to subjects related to foreign affairs and legal protection. I made a mental note to include this detail in my evening debrief with the investigation team. "Sounds fascinating," Mom said smoothly, her diplomatic training allowing her to navigate conversational minefields with grace. "Will this be at the Georgetown Library?" "Actually, we're meeting at a coffee shop in DuPont Circle." Marcus suggested it because the atmosphere is more conducive to creative thinking. There it was. Marcus was still very much in the picture, still influencing Vivian's choices and schedule. I felt the weight of the recording device against my chest and forced myself to ask a natural follow-up question. "Is this the same Marcus you've been dating? You never talk about him anymore." Vivian's eyes flicked toward me with something that might have been suspicion, or might have been simple annoyance. "We've been taking things slow, getting to know each other on a deeper intellectual level rather than just focusing on romance." The phrase sounded rehearsed, like something she'd been coached to say. Agent Morse had warned me that foreign handlers often instructed their assets to downplay romantic relationships to family members, making the connections seem less significant, while actually deepening the operational control. "That's very mature," Dad said mildly. "Though I hope you're being careful about discussing family matters with new acquaintances. You know how people can take casual comments out of context." The warning was subtle but unmistakable. Vivian's hand tightened slightly around her coffee cup, and I caught a flicker of something that looked like fear in her expression. Of course, she said. We mostly discuss academic topics. Constitutional theory, international relations, historical precedents for diplomatic conflicts. Marcus has a fascinating perspective on how small European countries navigate relationships with larger powers. Each detail felt like another piece of evidence falling into place. Agent Morse had explained that intelligence operatives often probed for information by discussing abstract policy topics that gradually became more specific and personal. Vivian's description of their conversations suggested a textbook recruitment pattern. Small European countries do face unique challenges, Mom observed. The balance between sovereignty and security partnerships requires delicate, diplomatic maneuvering. Exactly what Marcus says, Vivian replied, warming to the topic. He grew up watching his home country struggle with those exact issues. It gives him insights that most American students don't have. Which country is he from originally? I asked, trying to sound like a curious sister rather than an intelligence gatherer. Romania, Vivian said without hesitation. His family moved here when he was 12, but he still has strong connections to the political situation back home. I filed this information away, knowing that the FBI would cross-reference it against Dmitry Volkov's known cover identities. The details were probably carefully constructed lies, but even lies could reveal patterns about his operational methods. Well, don't be out too late, Dad said, returning to his briefing papers. I'm expecting some important calls this evening, and I'd prefer if the house was quiet. Important calls about what? Vivian asked, her interest a little too sharp for casual conversation. Dad's eyes met hers over his reading glasses. Department business. Nothing that would interest a constitutional law student. The subtle rebuff hung in the air like smoke. Vivian's cheeks flushed slightly, but she didn't push the subject. Instead, she finished her breakfast quickly and excused herself to get ready for her mysterious meeting with Marcus. After she left the room, Dad folded his newspaper with deliberate precision and looked at me directly. How are you holding up with all this? I glanced toward the kitchen door to make sure Vivian was out of earshot. It's surreal. She's sitting right there acting like everything is normal, but every word she says feels loaded with hidden meaning. That's because it probably is, Mom said quietly. Intelligence operatives train their assets to gather information through seemingly innocent conversations. What feels like casual family chat to us is actually systematic data collection to them. Are you recording all of this too? Dad nodded toward a small device I hadn't noticed on the sideboard. The house has been equipped with comprehensive surveillance equipment. Every conversation, every phone call, every interaction is being documented for the investigation. The idea that my own home had become a surveillance operation was deeply unsettling, but I understood the necessity. If Vivian was actively gathering intelligence for a foreign government, every piece of information she collected could potentially compromise national security. What about my friends? My school? Are they monitoring everything I do too? Your activities are being observed for your own protection, Mom explained. If this Marcus person realizes that we know about his true identity, he might try to pressure Vivian into more aggressive actions. Having you under surveillance ensures that you can't be used as leverage against our family. The implications were staggering. My entire life had become part of a national security operation, with federal agents monitoring my social interactions and academic activities to prevent foreign interference in American government operations. When does this end? When we've neutralized the threat and secured any compromised information, Dad replied. How long that takes depends largely on what Vivian does next and how deeply she's been compromised. My phone buzzed with a text message from Kai, my best friend since middle school. Movie night tonight? My parents are out of town and I've got popcorn and terrible romantic comedies. I looked at Dad questioningly. Can I have a normal teenage evening? Or is that too risky now? Actually, maintaining your regular routines is important for operational security, Dad said. If you suddenly change your behavior patterns, It might alert Vivian that something has changed in the family dynamic. But I'll still be wearing surveillance equipment? A modified version. Agent Morse will brief you before you leave this afternoon. The conversation was interrupted by Vivian's return to the kitchen, now dressed in jeans and a sweater that managed to look both casual and deliberately attractive. She'd applied makeup with more care than usual and styled her hair in loose waves that suggested she was trying to impress someone. "I'll probably be out most of the day," she announced, gathering her purse and jacket. The study group might extend into dinner, and Marcus mentioned wanting to show me some historical sites around the city. "Which historical sites?" I asked, genuinely curious about what a Russian intelligence operative would consider educationally valuable. "The Capitol building, maybe some of the Smithsonian museums." He is particularly interested in the Museum of American History's collection on Cold War diplomacy. The choice seemed almost comically on the nose for a foreign spy, but I kept my expression neutral. "Sounds educational." "Text me if you're going to be later than midnight," Mom said, her tone carrying the right balance of maternal concern and trust. "And remember that your father has early meetings tomorrow, so try to be quiet when you come in." "Of course," Vivian replied, kissing Mom's cheek with what appeared to be genuine affection. "I love you both. And Zara, I'm sorry again about last night. I know I ruined your party, and I hope we can find a way to make things right between us." The apology felt sincere, which made everything worse. This wasn't a calculating spy manipulating her family. This was my sister, confused and probably scared, trying to navigate a situation she didn't fully understand, while being controlled by someone trained to exploit her emotions. "We'll figure it out," I said, meaning it more than she could possibly know. After Vivian left, the house felt different, charged with the kind of tension that comes from waiting for something significant to happen. Dad disappeared into his study for a secure video conference with his Pentagon colleagues, while Mom worked on charity event planning that now carried additional weight since we knew foreign intelligence was monitoring our family's social connections. Agent Morse arrived at 2 o'clock, carrying a briefcase that contained surveillance equipment disguised as everyday teenage accessories. The replacement wire was woven into the fabric of a school cardigan, virtually undetectable, even to someone looking for it. She also provided me with an earpiece designed to look like a fashionable wireless earbud, allowing the surveillance team to communicate with me if necessary. "Your job tonight is simple," Agent Morse explained as she demonstrated the equipment. "Act normally with your friend, but pay attention to any calls or messages you receive. If Vivian tries to contact you, engage naturally, but don't volunteer information about family activities or your father's schedule. What if she asks direct questions about Dad's work? Deflect with typical teenage responses. You're not interested in boring political stuff, you don't pay attention to his meetings, you're too focused on school and friends to care about government business. The key is to seem authentically disengaged rather than deliberately evasive. And if something goes wrong?" Agent Morse handed me a small device that looked like a fashionable phone charm. "Press this button and hold it for 3 seconds. Within 5 minutes, you'll have federal protection at your location." The weight of responsibility felt crushing. I was 16 years old, and the FBI was asking me to help them catch my own sister in an act of espionage while maintaining the pretense of normal family relationships. "Agent Morse," I said as she packed up her equipment, "what happens to Vivian if she's really been compromised by this Marcus person? I mean, what's the best-case scenario here?" She paused in her packing, considering her response carefully. "If we can prove that she was manipulated without her knowledge of his true identity, and if she cooperates fully with our investigation, she might avoid espionage charges. But she'll still face serious criminal penalties for the technology theft and communication fraud." "How serious?" "Potentially years in federal prison. And even if she serves a reduced sentence, her future career prospects will be severely limited. Security clearances, government positions, many private sector jobs. All of that becomes impossible with a federal conviction for crimes related to national security." The bleakness of Vivian's situation hit me like a physical blow. Even in the best-case scenario, her life as she'd planned it was over. The Harvard Law degree, the political aspirations, the carefully constructed future she'd been working toward, all of it would disappear because she'd fallen in love with the wrong person. Is there any way to protect her? That depends on what we discover about her level of awareness and cooperation, Agent Morse replied. And it depends on whether she's willing to help us neutralize the broader threat that Marcus represents. What do you mean? Marcus isn't just targeting your family. Intelligence suggests he's running a network of assets throughout Washington's political and military community. If Vivian can help us identify and locate his other operations, that cooperation could significantly impact her legal situation. So she might have to betray other people he's recruited? She might have to help us save other people who've been manipulated the same way she was. After Agent Morse left, I spent the afternoon trying to focus on homework while processing the magnitude of what was happening around me. My calculus problems seemed absurdly trivial compared to the international espionage operation unfolding in my living room, but maintaining academic routines was apparently crucial for operational security. At 6 o'clock, Dad's secure phone rang with what sounded like an urgent call. I heard him speaking in the clipped, professional tones he used for crisis management, followed by the kind of extended silence that suggested he was receiving briefings rather than giving orders. When he emerged from his study 20 minutes later, his expression was grimmer than I'd seen since this whole situation began. "What happened?" Mom asked immediately. "Dmitry Volkov missed a scheduled check-in with his handlers," Dad said quietly. "Either something's gone wrong with his operation, or he's preparing to escalate his activities with Vivian. What does that mean for tonight?" "It means we need to be prepared for the possibility that Vivian's meeting with Marcus isn't just a casual date. It might be the beginning of whatever they've been building toward." My phone buzzed with a text from Vivian. "Hey sis, hope you're having a good day. Love you." The message was so unlike her usual communication style that it felt like a coded signal. Vivian never sent unprompted affectionate texts, especially not after family conflicts. I showed the message to Dad and Mom, watching their expressions shift as they processed its potential significance. "Response?" Dad asked. I typed back, "Love you too. Have fun with your study group." "Good," Mom said. Natural, but not overly engaged. As I prepared to leave for Kai's house, wearing my surveillance equipment and carrying my emergency communication device, I realized that my normal teenage life had become a carefully orchestrated performance in a drama with national security implications. The next few hours would determine whether we could save my sister from the consequences of her own manipulated choices, or whether she was already too deeply committed to a path that would destroy our entire family. Kai's house felt like stepping into a parallel universe where teenagers worried about algebra tests instead of international espionage. Her parents' absence meant we had the run of their sprawling McLean home, complete with a media room that rivaled most commercial theaters. Under normal circumstances, this would have been the perfect escape from family drama. Tonight, it felt like being an actor who'd forgotten she was still on stage. "You're being weird," Kai announced after our third consecutive movie, pausing the remote mid-scene. "Like, weirder than usual, and that's saying something because you've been off all semester." I adjusted my position on the oversized sectional sofa, hyper-aware of the surveillance equipment woven into my cardigan. "Just family stuff. You know how it gets when Dad's busy with work? Secretary of Defense busy or regular parent busy? Is there a difference?" Kai laughed, but her dark eyes remained focused on my face with the kind of attention that came from years of friendship. "Normally, no. But you look like someone who hasn't slept in a week and keeps checking her phone for messages from the apocalypse." She wasn't wrong. My phone had buzzed 6 times during our movie marathon, but none of the messages were from Vivian. Instead, they were coded updates from Agent Morse, package delivered safely, recipient confirmed at secondary location, extended timeline approved for evening activities. Each message meant that Vivian was still with Marcus, still presumably unaware that her romantic evening was being monitored by federal surveillance teams positioned throughout downtown Washington. "Earth to Zara," Kai said, waving a piece of popcorn in front of my face. "I'm talking to you." "Sorry, what did you say?" "I asked if this family stuff has anything to do with your sister. Because she's been acting strange at school lately, and people are starting to notice." My attention sharpened immediately. "What do you mean, acting strange?" "Like she's stressed about something bigger than law school applications. Yesterday she was in the library taking notes on some guy's laptop conversation, and when I asked her about it, she got defensive and said she was researching social psychology for a paper." "Taking notes on someone's conversation?" "Yeah, this college-age guy was video chatting with someone in what sounded like a foreign language. Russian, maybe?" Vivian was sitting close enough to eavesdrop and writing down everything she could understand. When I pointed out how weird that was, she said she was practicing language comprehension for her international law studies. The implications hit me like cold water. Vivian wasn't just meeting with Marcus for romantic dates. She was actively gathering intelligence in public spaces, using her access to Georgetown's campus to monitor communications that might be valuable to foreign handlers. "Did you recognize the guy she was watching?" "No, but he looked familiar in that way that probably means he's in student government or debate team or something. Tall, dark hair, expensive clothes that scream, 'My parents buy me designer everything.'" The description matched the photo Agent Morse had shown me of Dmitry Volkov. If Vivian was conducting surveillance operations on campus, it meant her involvement with Russian intelligence had progressed far beyond casual information sharing. My phone buzzed again. This time the message was different. Timeline accelerated. Package requesting immediate extraction. I stared at the coded language, trying to decode what it meant while maintaining normal conversation with Kai. Package was Vivian. Extraction suggested she was asking to leave her current location ahead of schedule. Immediate meant something had gone wrong. "Zara, you're doing it again," Kai said, her voice carrying a note of genuine concern. "Whatever's going on with your family, it's bigger than regular stuff, isn't it?" I looked at my best friend, weighing operational security against the need for human connection. The surveillance equipment I wore meant that every word would be recorded and analyzed, but Kai deserved some version of the truth. "My sister got involved with someone who isn't what he seems," I said carefully. "It's complicated, and it might affect our whole family." "Like, dangerous complicated or just drama complicated?" "Dangerous." Kai's expression shifted from curiosity to alarm. "Should I be worried about you being here? Like, are you safe?" "I think so. But if anything weird happens tonight, promise me you'll call your parents immediately and ask them to come home." "What kind of weird?" Before I could answer, my phone rang. Not a text this time, but an actual call from a number I didn't recognize. The caller ID showed only secure line. "I need to take this," I told Kai, stepping into the kitchen for privacy. "Miss Blackwood?" Agent Morse's voice was tense, with controlled urgency. "We need you to return home immediately. Your sister's situation has escalated beyond our current operational parameters." "What happened?" "She's requesting emergency assistance from someone she called family backup, which we believe means she's been instructed to involve you directly in whatever operation she's conducting tonight." My blood turned to ice. "She's going to ask me to help her with something?" "We believe Marcus has instructed her to bring you to their location for what he's described as a family celebration, related to your birthday party. Our assessment is that this represents an attempt to expand their intelligence gathering to include you as an asset. They want to recruit me too? Or use you as leverage to ensure your sister's continued cooperation. Either way, you cannot go to that location under any circumstances. What if she gets suspicious when I refuse? Your safety takes priority over operational cover. We're moving to interdiction protocols effective immediately." The clinical language couldn't disguise the gravity of what Agent Morse was telling me. The investigation had shifted from surveillance to active intervention, which meant federal agents were about to arrest my sister for espionage. "How long do I have?" 30 minutes, Can you get home safely in that time frame? Yes. Good. And Miss Blackwood? Whatever happens next, remember that none of this is your fault. Your sister made choices that led to this situation, but you've helped us prevent a much worse outcome. I returned to the media room where Kai was pretending to watch the movie while obviously waiting for an explanation. I have to go home, I said, gathering my jacket and purse. Family emergency. The dangerous, complicated kind? Yeah. Kai stood up immediately. Do you want me to drive you? Or call someone? You look like you might pass out. I'll be fine. But Kai, if anyone asks you about tonight, just say we watched movies and I left early because I wasn't feeling well. Don't mention anything about my sister or the conversation we had. Now you're really scaring me. I hugged her tightly, suddenly aware that this might be the last normal moment I'd have for a very long time. I'm sorry for being weird lately. It'll make sense eventually, but right now I just need you to trust me. Always. The drive home felt surreal, as if I were traveling through a landscape that looked familiar but operated according to completely different rules. Every car behind me could be surveillance. Every intersection a potential checkpoint. Every decision a component in a larger strategic operation that would determine my family's future. Our estate appeared ahead, its security lights creating pools of illumination that revealed more vehicles than usual in the circular driveway. Official government sedans mixed with unmarked SUVs, creating the kind of motorcade that suggested high-level crisis management in progress. Dad met me at the front door, his expression grim but relieved. Thank God you're here safely, he said, ushering me inside. We've had developments. The foyer had been transformed into what looked like a command center. Laptops displayed real-time surveillance feeds, communication equipment crackled with coded chatter, and at least 6 people I didn't recognize moved through our home with the practiced efficiency of a military operation. Director Chen stood near Dad's study, coordinating multiple conversations through a wireless headset while monitoring feeds from what appeared to be downtown Washington locations. Miss Blackwood, she said as I approached, your sister has been attempting to contact you for the past 20 minutes. We need you to answer her calls and follow the script we've prepared. She handed me a tablet containing detailed instructions for how to respond to various scenarios. If Vivian asked me to meet her somewhere, I should express interest but say I needed permission from our parents. If she sounded distressed, I should offer emotional support while deflecting questions about family activities. If she mentioned Marcus or any request for help, I should seem confused and ask for clarification. What's the goal here? I asked. We need to determine whether she's acting under duress or whether she's willingly participating in intelligence gathering that now includes targeting you, Director Chen explained. Her responses will help us decide whether to proceed with arrest or attempt a rescue operation. My phone rang before I could process the full implications of what she'd said. Vivian's name appeared on the screen, and everyone in the room turned toward me with the kind of focused attention usually reserved for crucial moments in international negotiations. Hey Viv, I answered, trying to sound like a normal sister rather than a federal informant. Zara! Her voice carried a strange combination of excitement and anxiety. I'm so glad you answered. Listen, I know this is last minute, but Marcus has planned something really special to make up for what happened at your party. What kind of special? A private celebration, just for us. He reserved space at this amazing restaurant downtown, and he wants to meet you properly since he's such an important part of my life now. I looked at the script on the tablet, finding the appropriate response. That sounds nice, but it's kind of late, and I'm already at Kai's house. Can't you come downtown for just a little while? It would mean so much to me, and Marcus is really excited to meet my little sister. The desperation in her voice was unmistakable, but I couldn't tell whether it came from romantic enthusiasm or something more sinister. Around me, federal agents monitored the conversation through equipment that would analyze every vocal inflection for signs of deception or distress. I don't know, Viv. Mom and Dad might be weird about me going downtown this late, especially after everything that happened yesterday. Please, Zara, this is really important to me. Marcus says family approval matters more than anything else in serious relationships. The phrase sounded coached, like something she'd been instructed to say to overcome my resistance. I glanced at Director Chen, who nodded toward the script's emergency protocols. Where downtown? And what time would I need to be back? The Hay Adams Hotel. There's a private dining room reserved under Marcus's name. We could have dinner, you could get to know him, and then he'd make sure you got home safely by midnight. The Hay Adams was less than a mile from the White House, directly across from Lafayette Square. Meeting there would place me in one of the most surveilled locations in Washington, surrounded by federal law enforcement and Secret Service coverage that would make foreign intelligence operations extremely difficult. Unless, of course, that was exactly what they wanted. "Let me ask Mom and Dad," I said, following the script. "Can I call you back in like 10 minutes? "Of course. But Zara, please say yes. This means everything to me." After I hung up, the room erupted in quiet but intense discussion. Director Chen consulted with what appeared to be surveillance teams monitoring the Hay Adams, while Dad spoke rapidly with someone at the Pentagon about threat assessments and response protocols. "It's obviously a trap," Agent Morse said, studying data on her laptop screen. "The location choice is too strategic to be coincidental. They want to conduct their operation in a place where federal response would be complicated by proximity to critical government facilities. Or they chose it because they know we can't risk a public incident that close to the White House." Dad countered. "The media coverage alone would compromise multiple ongoing operations." "What do you think they actually want with me?" I asked. Director Chen looked up from her headset consultation. "Best case scenario, they want to assess your potential value as a future asset. Worst case, they plan to use you as leverage to ensure your sister's continued cooperation with increasingly serious intelligence requests. And the in-between scenario, they're preparing to extract both of you from the country before we can complete our investigation." The possibility hadn't occurred to me, but it made terrifying sense. If Dmitry Volkov realized that his operation was compromised, he might attempt to preserve his assets by removing them from American jurisdiction entirely. "We can't let her go to that meeting," I said. "We can't prevent her from going without revealing the extent of our knowledge," Dad replied. "If we intervene too early, we lose our chance to understand the full scope of their operation and identify other compromised assets. So we're just going to let her walk into whatever they have planned? We're going to use this opportunity to end their operation permanently," Director Chen said, with the kind of calm certainty that suggested she'd orchestrated similar situations before. "But we need your help to do it safely." She outlined a plan that was simultaneously simple and terrifyingly complex. I would agree to meet Vivian and Marcus at the Hay Adams, but I'd be wearing sophisticated surveillance equipment that would allow federal agents to monitor every conversation and intervene immediately if the situation became dangerous. The hotel would be saturated with undercover agents, and extraction teams would be positioned within seconds of our location. "You'd essentially be functioning as bait," Agent Morse explained. "But extremely well-protected bait in a controlled environment designed to expose their operational methods." "What happens to Vivian when you arrest them?" "That depends on what we discover about her level of knowledge and cooperation," Director Chen replied. "If she's genuinely unaware of Marcus's true identity and agrees to testify against him, she might avoid the most serious charges. And if she knows exactly what she's doing, then she faces the full consequences of committing espionage against the United States." The weight of decision felt crushing. I could refuse to participate, knowing that doing so might allow dangerous foreign agents to escape justice while leaving other American families vulnerable to similar recruitment. Or I could agree to help, knowing that my cooperation might result in my sister spending the rest of her life in federal prison. "If I do this," I said slowly, "and something goes wrong, what happens to my family?" Dad's expression softened slightly. "If something goes wrong, it won't be because we didn't prepare for every contingency. Your safety is our highest priority, higher than the investigation, higher than my career, higher than anything else. But if Vivian is really working with Russian intelligence, and if this operation exposes that publicly, Your position as defense secretary becomes untenable, doesn't it? He nodded slowly. Yes, but Zara, some things matter more than political careers. Protecting you and stopping these people from damaging national security matters more than any job. I looked around the room at the assembled federal agents, the surveillance equipment, the tactical displays showing real-time intelligence from across Washington. My ruined Sweet 16 party had led to the discovery of a foreign intelligence operation targeting the highest levels of American government. The teenage drama that had seemed so devastating just days ago was actually the key to preventing a much larger catastrophe. I'll do it, I said, but I want guarantees about Vivian's safety, regardless of what we discover about her involvement. You have them, Director Chen replied immediately. I called Vivian back and agreed to meet her at the Hay Adams at 9 o'clock. Her relief was audible, but underneath it I detected something that might have been fear or regret. Whatever Marcus had planned for tonight, part of her understood that it represented a point of no return. The next 2 hours passed in a blur of preparation that felt like suiting up for combat. The surveillance equipment was more sophisticated than anything I'd worn before, including video capabilities and real-time communication with tactical support teams. Agent Morse coached me on conversation techniques that would encourage Marcus to reveal operational details while avoiding questions that might expose my cooperation with federal authorities. As we prepared to leave for downtown, Dad pulled me aside for a private conversation. I want you to know how proud I am of your courage, he said quietly. What you're doing tonight could prevent other families from going through what we've experienced. What if we can't save her? Then we'll face that together, as a family. But Zara, regardless of what happens with Vivian, you've already saved us by helping expose this operation before it could cause more damage. The drive to the Hay Adams felt like traveling toward a reckoning that would determine not just my sister's fate, but the future of everything I'd believed about family, loyalty, and the price of loving someone who'd made unforgivable choices. As our vehicle approached Lafayette Square, I could see Vivian waiting near the hotel entrance, beautiful and nervous in a dress that suggested she was trying to make a good impression on people whose approval would ultimately destroy her. The girl who had sabotaged my birthday party was about to discover that some betrayals carry consequences that reach far beyond anything she could have imagined. And I was about to learn whether saving your family sometimes means being the one who turns them in. The operation that began with ruined seating charts and fake text messages was about to end with handcuffs and headlines that would change our lives forever. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.